At 82, I've gained a lot of wisdom about life, but there's one decision I deeply regret: moving into a nursing home. At the time, it seemed like the right choice. My family encouraged it, assuring me I'd receive all the care and comfort I needed. I trusted them, but once I settled in, I realized the reality was far from what I had imagined. If you're considering this option for yourself or a loved one, perhaps believing it's the safest or most convenient choice, I urge you to pause and reflect. Before you take that step, let me share 6 things I wish someone had told me before I moved in. Life in a nursing home isn't just about convenience. It transforms everything. And once you're in, leaving isn't as simple as it seems. Stay with me until the end, because these lessons might surprise you. If you know someone contemplating a nursing home, this might be exactly what they need to hear before making a life-altering decision. Let's begin. Regret. 1. Losing my independence. The most jarring realization after moving into a nursing home wasn't the cramped room, the rigid meal schedules, or the unfamiliar faces. It was the sudden loss of control over my own life. Before moving in, I had my routines. I decided when to wake up, what to eat, and how to spend my days. I could take walks whenever I pleased, cook my own meals, or simply relax in my favorite chair with a book. But inside the nursing home, I quickly discovered that my time was no longer mine. Everything operated on a schedule that wasn't my own. Breakfast was served at a fixed time, even if I wasn't hungry. Lights were turned off at a specific hour, whether I was ready or not. If I wanted to take a walk outside, I often needed permission and had to wait for assistance. Simple decisions like what to eat or wear began to feel like privileges rather than basic rights. I vividly remember my first week there, waking up in a bed that didn't feel like mine. I reached for the book I'd been reading at home, only to look around and realize this wasn't my home. My books, my favorite chair, the little comforts I'd spent years collecting, they were gone. In their place were sterile walls, a bed I hadn't chosen, and an overwhelming sense that I was no longer in charge of my own life. The hardest part? Understanding that once you surrender your independence, reclaiming it is nearly impossible. You adapt because you must. You stop questioning the meal choices. You stop asking if you can go for a walk whenever you want. You learn to fit into their system, but in the process, you begin to lose yourself. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you ready to give up the small freedoms that make life yours? Because once they're gone, you'll miss them more than you ever imagined. Regret. 2. Feeling forgotten. One of the most painful truths about moving into a nursing home is realizing that life outside continues without you. When I first arrived, my family promised they'd visit often. I believed them, and initially they did. My daughter came by weekly, my grandchildren visited on weekends, and for a while it felt like I still had a connection to my old life. But as months passed, the visits grew less frequent. My daughter started calling instead of visiting. My grandchildren became busy with school and work. Holidays were particularly hard. Everyone promised to visit, but plans often changed last minute. Before long, I found myself sitting alone in a common room, watching other residents stare at the door, hoping someone would remember them. It wasn't that my family stopped loving me. Life simply got in the way. When you're not part of their daily lives, It's easy for them to assume you're fine, that you've adjusted, that you don't need as much attention. But the truth is, the longer you're in a nursing home, the easier it becomes for people to forget how much you still need them. I remember one evening, sitting in my room, holding my phone, debating whether to call my son. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to remind him that I was here, waiting for a visit that might never come. So I put the phone down, and in that moment, it hit me. This was my life now, watching the days pass, hoping someone would remember to include me. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared for the loneliness? Because no matter how much your family loves you, once you're out of sight, it's easier than you think to become out of mind. Regret. 3. Losing my sense of purpose. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought I was simply changing where I lived. I didn't realize I was also changing why I lived. At home, I had responsibilities. I had routines, hobbies, and reasons to get up each morning. Even small tasks, watering the plants, making my own coffee, tidying up, gave me a sense of purpose. But in the nursing home, those daily rituals vanished. Meals were prepared for me. Cleaning was handled by staff. The plants, they weren't mine to care for anymore. At first I told myself it would be nice to finally relax. No more chores, no more responsibilities, just rest. But after a few weeks, I realized something was missing. The days felt endless, filled with nothing but waiting. I saw the same emptiness in other residents. People who had once been vibrant now spent their days sitting, staring, waiting for time to pass. There was a man named George, 84, who had been a carpenter his entire life. At home, he was always building or fixing something in his garage. But here, there were no tools, no projects, nothing for him to create. I watched as he slowly withdrew, his once strong hands now idle in his lap. "I feel useless," he told me one day, and I understood exactly what he meant. When you no longer have something to care for, something to work toward, life begins to lose its meaning. The mind slows, the body follows, and soon you feel like just another resident in a place where time moves, but nothing changes. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, what gives your life meaning? Because once you move in, finding purpose isn't as simple as filling your time. It's about fighting to hold on to what makes you feel alive. Regret. 4. Declining health. Faster than expected. Before moving into a nursing home, I was doing well for my age. I wasn't running marathons, but I could still take care of myself. Cook, clean, and go for walks. I had routines that kept me active. Grocery shopping, morning stretches, even just walking around the house to keep my legs strong. But once I moved in, everything changed. At first, it seemed like I was simply taking it easy. Meals were brought to me, and I no longer had to cook. If I needed something, I could press a button and someone would assist me. But what I didn't realize was that the less I did for myself, the weaker I became. I stopped moving as much, and soon my legs felt stiff. Sitting became the norm, and before I knew it, getting up from a chair felt like a chore. The muscles I'd spent years maintaining began to fade faster than I ever expected. And it wasn't just me. I saw it happen to others too. People who had walked in independently were suddenly relying on wheelchairs. Those who had once been self-sufficient now needed help with tasks they'd never struggled with before. The more assistance we received, the more we seemed to need. I remember my neighbor Alice, an 81-year-old woman who had been lively when she first arrived. She used to take daily walks around the facility, insisting she wouldn't slow down just because of her age. But after a few months, I noticed she wasn't walking as much. Then she started using a walker, then a wheelchair. One day, she looked at me and said, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." And that's exactly how it felt. When you stop using your body, you start losing it. In a nursing home where everything is designed to make life easier, it's easy to forget that movement isn't just about convenience. It's about survival. If I had known how quickly I'd lose my strength, I would have fought harder to stay active, to keep moving, even when I didn't feel like it. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, will you still have the motivation to keep your body strong when everything is set up to make life effortless? Because once you slow down, getting back up isn't as easy as you think. Regret. 5. The loss of privacy and dignity. One thing I didn't fully consider before moving into a nursing home was how much privacy I'd lose. At home, I had my own space. I could close my door, sit in silence, and do things on my own terms. But in a nursing home, privacy is a luxury you rarely get. From the moment I arrived, I felt constantly watched. Staff came in and out, room checks were scheduled, and shared spaces meant I was rarely alone. Even simple tasks, like getting dressed or using the bathroom, often required assistance. I know they were just doing their job, but it's hard to accept help for things you've done independently your entire life. I remember my first week struggling with the idea that I needed permission for things I once did without thinking. Want a shower? You might have to wait for assistance. Need to use the restroom? Pressing the call button could mean a long wait. Even meal choices were limited. If you didn't like what was served, tough luck. And then there were roommates. Not everyone gets a private room, and sharing space with someone you didn't choose can be challenging. I was fortunate to have a kind roommate, but others weren't as lucky. Some had roommates who were loud, messy, or had cognitive issues that made sleep nearly impossible. No matter how much you try to make your room feel like home, it never truly is. Dignity is hard to lose, and I didn't realize how much of mine I'd surrender until I was already there. When people knock but don't wait for an answer, when you're spoken to like a patient instead of a person, when your daily routines are dictated by someone else's schedule, it changes you. You start feeling less like yourself and more like just another name on a list. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared to give up the privacy and control you've had your entire life? Because once it's gone, it's hard to reclaim. Regret. 6. Realizing it's harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was temporary. I thought I'd try it out and leave if I didn't like it. But what I didn't realize was how difficult it would be to leave once I was in. At first, it seemed simple. If I didn't like it, I'd go back home. But home wasn't the same anymore. My house sat empty, and maintaining it from a distance became challenging. My children had already started making changes, selling things, considering renting it out. When I mentioned returning, they hesitated. Are you sure you can manage on your own? Wouldn't it be safer to stay? We just want what's best for you. And then there was the physical decline. After months of living in a place where I didn't have to cook, clean or walk much, I wasn't as strong as I used to be. The independence I once had began to slip away, making the idea of moving back home more daunting than I'd imagined. I wasn't as confident in my ability to live alone, and that fear kept me stuck. I met others who had the same experience. They thought they'd tried a nursing home temporarily, only to realize leaving wasn't as easy as they thought. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to adjust to life outside. Some people even lost the option entirely. Once their home was sold or their savings were drained by the cost of care, there was no going back. That's the part no one tells you. Moving in feels like a reversible decision, but for most, it isn't. The nursing home slowly becomes your entire world, and before you know it, the life you once knew feels like a distant memory. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that once you're in, leaving might not be as simple as you think? Because once you settle in, the barriers to leaving, financial, physical, or emotional, can be harder to overcome than you expect. Final thoughts. Looking back, I don't regret growing older, but I do regret believing a nursing home was my only option. I walked in expecting comfort, safety, and a better quality of life. What I found instead was a world that gradually stripped away my independence, privacy, purpose, and sense of self. Does this mean nursing homes are all bad? Not necessarily. Some people genuinely need the level of care they provide. But before you make that decision, think carefully about what you're giving up. Because once you move in, life will never be the same. If I could do it over, I would have fought harder to stay in my own home, explored more ways to get help without sacrificing my freedom, and ensured I truly needed to be there before making such a permanent move. If you're facing this decision, I hope you take the time to ask yourself, is this truly what's best for me? Or is it just what seems easiest right now? Because the life you have today, your routines, your independence, your choices, is worth holding on to for as long as you can. Thank you for joining me today. If you found these insights valuable, please share them with someone who might need to hear this. Your support helps spread important messages like this one. Take care, and I'll see you next time